I would like to call to order this charter review meeting of Thursday, August 15th. Assistant City Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Yes. Member Almazal? Member Bonito? Member Cooley? Member Coulterman? Member Ricosa?
Here.
Member Silva?
Here.
And Chair Jane.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay. A point of order. There were some organizational things. I didn't see those here on the agenda, but there were a couple of things that I don't know where they would go in the schedule. First, I think a number of members of this committee complained that we had printed copies of the packets, and perhaps we want to discuss whether we want to forego the printed copies and just do them online on our computers. And then there was a discussion about how to put something on a future agenda. So I don't know where that would fit into the schedule here. Do we want to discuss that at the end, or organizational?
This body doesn't have bylaws. There's no, you're basically under Robert's Rules of Order. So future agenda items would you can.
I think I'll leave those to the end because they may come up during the meeting.
Sure.
Okay. All right, so why don't we just go to public presentations at this point? Would any member of the public like to present on something that's not on the agenda? Please step forward and state your name.
Excuse me. Good evening, committee members. My name is Steve Chesson. I'm president of Californians for Electoral Reform. There's two items that aren't on your agenda that I think you should consider for a future agenda. One is, I believe you should make a recommendation to the City Council that they should put an amendment, a charter amendment, on the November 2020 ballot to establish an independent redistricting committee that would establish district lines after the 2020 census and every 10 years thereafter. The second recommendation I think you should make and should have on a future agenda to discuss is that a charter amendment that would have all elections in the city of Santa Clara be conducted using ranked choice voting. The Board of Supervisors just approved the contract with Dominion Voting Systems on Tuesday for equipment that will be able to process ranked choice voting elections beginning in 2020. That equipment will, I think, first be deployed for the March 2020 primary. So those are two things that I would like you to consider at a future meeting to make recommendation to the City Council. Thank you very much.
Okay, would any other member of the public like to speak at this time? There's a public input section at the very end of the meeting, but you can speak at both times if you wish. Okay, seeing that there's no other member of the public, we'll close public presentations. So now we move on to item number 3, which are the meeting minutes. And I believe that there were some corrections to the minutes.
Correct, Chair Jane. So good evening, Nora Pimentel, Assistant City Clerk. There will be some edits made throughout the minutes from the last meeting. The changes changing Mayor Coulterman to Member Coulterman. That was a typographical error, as well as changing the location for the September 26th meeting at Mission Library instead of Northside Branch Library.
Okay. So is there a motion to approve the minutes with those corrections, or does any member have other corrections?
No, so moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, passes unanimously. All right, now we move on to item number 4, and this is where the committee may ask questions on the California Voting Rights Act. Is there a staff presentation on this or anything?
Hey, Saj, this is and hey, community members. I'm getting big echo there. As far as the staff presentation, we don't have a presentation on this specific item, but Saj, I know you had already submitted a list of questions that you had on the CVRA, and if other members additionally have questions on the CVRA, you feel free to ask it in this agenda item. And the city staff and city attorney's office is prepared to respond to at least the questions that were submitted before.
Excuse me,
But-
city clerk. Here in this room, we can't understand anything you're saying. There's something about how you're speaking into the microphone that is not making its way into this room. Is there a way-
Okay.
Could you,
Can you-
maybe hold it further from your mouth and talk more slowly?
Okay, I'm using headphones. I will not use headphones. Give me a second.
A lot clearer.
Oh. Okay, how about this?
Much better.
Okay, awesome. So just to recap what I said, and I will try to speak a little slower, is that we don't have staff doesn't have a presentation, but SUD has already sent an email with some questions on the CVRA, and if additional committee members have more questions on the CVRA, the city attorney's office and staff are prepared to answer those questions. So now would be a good time to ask those questions as it pertains to the work of the committee.
Do any committee members have any questions on how the CVRA works? Member Coulterman.
So some people have commented in the survey that they're interested in 3 districts with 2 members per district. I was just wanting to know, has there ever been a case where a judge required a city elected body or any elected body to go to districts 1 per council member or 1 per elected official, and then the city was able to back off on that and have fewer districts with more members, or is that uncharted territory?
That's the way you pose the question is a little bit difficult to answer. The fact of the matter is very few judges have actually ruled on, ordered any cities to go to districts. There's only been a handful of cases which have actually gone to trial. And in several of those cases, they were general law cities, and one case that I'm aware of was a charter city, was Palmdale, and where the other city is Santa Clara. And then recently, I think Santa Monica was ordered to go to districts. And in all of those cases, they went to, I think, single-member districts. So there hasn't been a case where your question was relevant. In other words, whether there hasn't been a case where a judge has ruled on multi-member districts at all.
Any other questions? Yeah, Member Cooley.
So I have some questions on just the timing in relation to the order we're under, which was for the Voting Rights Act. So as I understand it, we're currently under order for the 2020 and 2022 election. There's going to have to be I think this would be, I don't think it's a CVR, but I think it's just, you have to have a redistricting because of the 2020 census before that 2022 election. So then my kind of questions were, is there any value in our recommendation being something along the lines of like saying the charter change would go into effect after that in order to just avoid the question entirely of it? Or is it better just to say we're not going to worry about it and it'll fall where it will?
First of all, the order does not pertain to the 2022 election. The order pertained to the 2018 election primarily, and then it also included the 2020 election. But other than that, the order doesn't talk about the 2022 election.
So this is the rephrase that is there any value in us structuring our recommendation as a charter change going into effect after 2020 in order to just avoid that complexity? Or is it not gonna?
No, I think it's the exact opposite. I think there's there's real impetus to get a charter change in, regardless of what the outcome of the appeal is, because the order only pertains to 2 elections. Even if the city were to lose the appeal and the order were to continue to be valid, it would only be valid through the 2020 election, and then we wouldn't know what to do in 2022.
So if, let's say there was a recommendation and it got on the ballot and it passed, which is already a large chain of ifs, and then the city didn't win the appeal, the court settlement would stay for 2020, and then this would take over in 2022 or 2020, whatever the next election is? Is that how that works? Just
Yeah, if the city were to, okay, let's take several scenarios. Let's take scenario 1 would be the city loses the appeal. Okay, then we're in the situation where we have a court order that is still valid for 2020, but then we don't know what to do in 2022. So it would make sense that we have a charter amendment that clearly states what we do in 2022, because the court order simply doesn't apply. It doesn't really address 2022. Let's take the other scenario. The city wins the appeal. If the city wins the appeal, then what happens is we go back to at-large elections, which is the way it's written in the charter. So given that Measure N indicated that a majority, a fairly substantial majority of the voters in Santa Clara wanted to go to district elections, it would make sense that you try to get that in place rather than go back to at-large elections, which it appears, at least from the advisory measure, doesn't seem to be what people want to do. So in either case, it makes sense for us to put this on the March 20 ballot so that we have predictability, understand. I mean, this is going to take some time for voters to understand, you know, what's going to happen in November 20. And so, and plus the candidates are going to have to know what are we running in. So that's why we recommended that the timeline be accelerated so that this charter amendment could be in place in time for November 20 and have an orderly election for November 2020.
okay.
Any other member?
Well, I just wanted to follow up. If we win the appeal, isn't the case retried?
Not necessarily.
Okay. Yeah.
Would it be possible to have in the ballot language of a charter amendment that the city council would put some sort of redistricting in place after the census is completed every decade, rather than having to have a separate ballot measure saying we need to consider the census?
Yeah, I was thinking that if it is the recommendation of the committee to go to some kind of district in the ballot measure, that we include something in that charter language that would talk about how we would do a redistricting. My recommendation to the council and to you would be, we just say that the city council shall provide a method, you know, whether it be by some independent committee. I don't think the council would want to do it themselves, but that whatever the process would either be very, very simple in the charter. You don't want to get too complicated in the charter, and you don't want to put actual districts in the charter, or you want the charter to spell out how districting, which body would do redistricting. And then that's typically just done as a separate process. That's not done through some kind of voter process. That's just simply done as an independent process. And there are various models we could follow. The state, for example, has an independent body that does redistricting. Other states, I think California formally had the legislature would do it themselves, but the other states that do the redistricting, where the legislature does the redistricting, are subject to a lot of criticism for gerrymandering, and then they get all kinds of lawsuits under the Federal Voting Rights Act for the way they do that gerrymandering. So, you know, I think Santa Clara, there's really not much room for gerrymandering here because there's no real, you know, concentrations of any one type of voter in Santa Clara. But we would try to spell out some kind of process. I think we could come up with something simple that would actually be in the same charter amendment that you're working on right now.
Okay, so I want to disclose that I had a fairly extensive meeting with Steve Chesson, and we discussed whether the districting has to be done in a ballot measure or it could be done by the city council by ordinance. And I just want to read what he said to me. Government Code Section 34886. This allows a city to adopt districts by ordinance without a vote of the people, as long as it is done to further the purposes of the CVRA. Some people believe that the law does not apply to charter cities, especially when the charter explicitly specifies how the city council is selected. That did not stop the city of Arcadia from switching to by-district elections in the 2017 election by adopting Ordinance 2350, despite Section 400 of the Arcadia City Charter explicitly calling for at-large elections. So General Code 34886 reads as follows. Notwithstanding Section 34871 or any other law, the legislative body of the city may adopt an ordinance that requires the members of the legislative body to be elected by district or by district with an elective mayor, as described in subdivisions A and C of Section 34871, without being required to submit the ordinance to the voters for approval. An ordinance adopted pursuant to this section shall include a declaration that the change in the method of electing members of the legislative body is being made in furtherance of the purposes of the CVRA. So I guess my question is, can't council, I mean, from what I've read, council could just decide to do this. We don't have to go
I don't
to-
agree with the city attorney of Arcadia if he said that was what
Okay,
we
well,
should do.
also, the cities of Torrance and Santa Rosa did it.
I don't agree with them either.
Okay. So I guess my question is, I have a couple more questions here. First, what if the ballot measure fails? What if we put something on the ballot and it fails? Then what do we do?
Then it will be according to whatever the outcome of the appeal is. I mean, if the city wins the appeal and the ballot measure fails, that means that the voters of Santa Clara did not want to go to districts and that they preferred to remain having at-large elections, and the court has nothing to say about it.
Well, it seems to me that we would once again be subject to another CVRA lawsuit because the legislature of the state of California has deemed that
Well, you
at-large elections.
You misapprehend the CVRA then, because the CVRA only goes into effect if you have an election that violates the CVRA. And so if we win the appeal, that means that we didn't violate the CVRA, and the judge has no business amending our charter in violation of democratic principles of a charter city.
Well, I understand that's if we win the appeal, but if we lose the appeal and the ballot measure fails, then what happens?
Then we'll have a district elections in 2020, and it'll be up to the people as to whether they want to do something else after that.
But we could be subject to another CVRA lawsuit.
Well, I don't know. Maybe
We could be.
We could be.
You're saying-
I mean, we're talking about hypothetical situations.
But I need to cover that case because I'm trying to protect the
all right.
treasury of the city.
It's not your job to protect the treasury of the city.
My taxpayer money.
It's your job to analyze charter, to analyze what kind of a charter amendment we should put forward.
But what I'm saying is that, let's say the ballot measure fails, then the city council could just go and implement districts by ordinance.
Well, then why don't we cross that bridge when we get to it rather than talk about it tonight?
Okay, I'm just trying to understand what our possibilities are. It doesn't exactly make sense to me. Okay, so those were my questions, and I think you provided an answer. If there are no further questions from the committee, I'd like to open it up to the public. Would any member of the public like to speak on this item?
On which item?
Item number 4.
Steve Chesson, President of Californians for Electoral Reform. Since I was the person who brought that to the attention of your chair, I'd like to speak on that particular item. I'm not an attorney, but as an educated layperson, I do disagree with your city attorney, and it would be up to the city council to decide if they could adopt such an ordinance, and the city council could always take action against the advice of the city attorney. To my knowledge, Santa Rosa and, Torrance and Arcadia have held district elections under the ordinances that they passed, even though their charters explicitly call for a different form of election. And so far, no one has brought suit against them. So that would be a recommendation to make to the city council, which I believe would be within your purview to make that recommendation, even against the recommendation of the city attorney. Thank you.
Any other member of the public? Please come forward. Item 4.
Yeah, not a lawyer either. But I just want to inform the committee that no city has won a lawsuit against CVRA. I think that's something that we need to consider. By 2020, 90 cities, all of whom were challenged and lost lawsuits, and including a lot of others who have not gotten to lawsuits. They either claim safe harbor or other things. Will also move to district voting. Other thing that we need to consider is that to kind of counter gerrymandering and some of the problems brought up by CVRA and having underrepresentation, I believe that the common solution is single-member districts. That's the common solution. I don't believe that's the only solution, but if you look at the problems with multi-member districts, you will see that fair voting is not a single parameter problem. There are many parameters you have to look at, and the number of districts alone will not fix that problem, especially when there are more people in each district, more seats in that district. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member of the public?
Rob Jordanic, resident of Santa Clara for 14 years. I am in favor of district elections. Helps ensure geographic representation across the city. And I really think we should look really what's best for our city of Santa Clara rather than just looking at all these all other cities, what they're doing. We should make sure it fits what our specific city. And I live on the north side, and I think the north side is kind of one community of interest. We have the areas north of 101, a lot of the common issues. The stadium is one example. There's others as well. And the problem with the 6 districts is no matter how you draw the lines, you're always going to be splitting the north side into 2 at least. And but we want north side to be like cohesive neighborhood. So for the options that were put to us in the surveys, it was 2, 3, or 6 districts. I would choose the 3 districts because then you can draw the districts so the north side can all be together and make decisions together. And probably in the other parts of the city, southern areas, there'd be less lines to draw, less bickering about where the lines should be. Another problem with the 6th district plan, and I'm not sure if it was mentioned, but there's a phenomenon called mini mayors.
We're talking about the CVRA at this point. If you would like to talk towards the end about how we want to do districts.
Okay, so this is not.
This is just CVRA.
Okay, I'll come up later then.
Okay, thank
Thanks.
you. Yeah. Okay, if there's no other member of the, okay, come forward, please.
Hi, Anthony Becker, resident of Santa Clara. Based on the CVRA lawsuit, I see this as when a judge said to stop segregating schools, it meant stop segregating schools, not go put it on the ballot and say, hey, do you guys want to stop segregating schools? The law is the law. So in this case, I think this is a waste of time. And I think that the CVR lawsuit, we will lose the lawsuit. No city has ever won it. And right now we are currently the most expensive lawsuit in the history of the state of California. So I think this is just a waste of time. And to be honest, 6 districts is the answer. And the CVR lawsuit, we will probably lose and continue to lose money. And we are also taking that money from taxpayers. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member of the public? Okay, now we'll move on to item number 5. Is there a staff presentation on this?
Hey, Hassan's here again for item number 5. Can you hear me better this time?
No.
Barely.
Oh, God. How about now?
That's better.
Okay. Okay, this is going to be a verbal report. We don't have slides to share, but I did want to share some of the numbers and kind of outreach that the city has done to date. These numbers were pulled as of last week, and we'll continue to update the committee if that is of interest of the committee with the additional outreach that is done at the next meeting as well. The city staff has put on the website, I'm sure a lot of you have already seen this website, santaclaraca.gov/charter review committee. The website launched on May 15th of this year for obviously this new charter review committee. And as of last week, there were just under 700 unique views to the website. The city also modified the main banner on the Santa Clara website to link folks to the charter review page within the website to inform the community of what your committee is doing with regards to Measure N. There's also been a lot of outreach on social media, Nextdoor, Facebook, and Twitter. I know a lot of folks have asked about Nextdoor. Certainly something that as individual committee members from your districts, the way Nextdoor works, it would be a very good idea for the committee members to post within their Nextdoor neighborhoods and adjacent neighborhoods within Nextdoor to solicit input and also publicize the listening sessions and the city meetings, the committee meetings. But the city also went ahead and made 4 posts on Nextdoor for a total of a little over 4,000 impressions, 4,300 impressions from residents within Santa Clara. The city also made 16 posts on Facebook that either spoke directly to or linked folks to the Charter Review Committee work or referenced it, and that garnered over 7,300 people that were reached. Now, because of several posts, some of the folks that are reached may be the same folks, but on the largest one here, almost 1,000 people were reached on a single post. And Twitter likewise had 16 posts with just a hair under 65,000 impressions. Again, because it is distributed across 16 posts, some of the impressions may be from the same individuals, but the largest one got just a hair under 9,000 impressions. Moving on, with regards to e-notify and email outreach, the city sent 6 emails with regards to the Charter Review Committee work. A couple of them were soliciting applicants to the committee, but several have come out after the committee was formed to educate people and link them to the website, but also to inform them of the committee meetings and the listening sessions. And out of those, roughly we're getting about between 16 to 22% open rate of these emails. One email reached over 12,000 people, and the rest are hitting about 1,400 recipients, again, based on what people are signing up for on e-notify. And the open rate is actually a little higher than the standard city average, which is, about 14.5% open rate. So these emails are getting a slightly higher average, which is good news for the committee. 4 more emails are scheduled on eNotify to inform folks of the upcoming committee meetings as well. So that's on the books as well. The Charter Review Committee work has also been referenced in all of the city managers' blogs. So several of those have gone out, and several more will continue to go out for the duration of the committee's work. And the Charter Review Committee is also publicized extensively on the Santa Clara City television. And so there's a slide linking folks to the committee's work and the committee sub-web page on the city website. And also it lists the committee meeting, upcoming meeting dates and times. And then as far as flyers go, I know the committee had requested flyers at several locations within the city. So if you go to any of the city libraries, the community rec center, senior center, the city offices and the clerk's office, the mayor and council's offices, there are several flyers across all of those locations, and translations of the flyers into Chinese, Hindi, and Spanish are underway, and those will go up in those same locations as well. The fall edition of the Inside Santa Clara newspaper will also include information about the committee's work and linking folks to the committee website, the Charter Review Committee's website, as well as informing them of the upcoming meeting dates. And there will also be a utility bill insert in September as part of Mission City's theme. So every resident who's getting a utility bill in the mail will see that insert as well, informing them of the committee. And finally, the city department has newsletters in September and October. They will feature the committee's work as well. The newsletters, the Santa Clara City Library newsletter, the Parks and Rec newsletter, and the Senior Center newsletter, all 3 of those will have reference and information about the Charter Review Committee's work. So all in all, the outreach has been pretty robust. So, if there are any questions about the outreach that has been done to date, we'll take that now. And if there are any ideas or suggestions, I think we can talk about that on item 6C for additional ones. But if you have questions on what has been done to date, you can take them now on item number 5 on the agenda.
I think Member Silva has a...
Just turned it off.
Okay. Is there an option to do a paper survey for those who don't have a computer? Like several people, they maybe go to the senior center or they just don't have the time to do it. If they come to an event like a night like this, you can hand them a copy and they can do the fill out the boxes instead of the online survey.
I think that's a great idea, Committee Member Silva. I think maybe we can discuss the ideas for outreach on item 6C. So I think maybe save the ideas until 6C, the agenda, but I think it's a good idea.
Okay. Commissioner Ricosa? Or member?
I was just going to add, if somebody could request a ballot by mail and we could send it to them and they could fill it out and mail it back.
Okay. Member Cooley?
In my packet, at least, I only see printouts of 2 emails. Did we just only get those emails, or is there more I'm missing?
Those emails...
Members of the public? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was just curious if there was more.
Those are the only 2 emails that we've received to date. Robin, I know that was current as of this afternoon. But most of the folks who have been providing input have been providing it through the online survey, which a pre-read was sent out. I think that's the next agenda item we can talk about. But pre-read was sent out last week with the responses received to date as of when it was sent last week. And then this afternoon, a new, the latest results were pulled. So we can talk about it at the next item. But those 2 emails that you're referring to, Mr. Cooley, are the only 2 emails that were sent to the specific, email address, the districts at santaclaraca.gov.
Awesome, thank you.
Member Silva.
I know that your office is doing a lot to advertise this. I made, since the last meeting, 58 contacts, and most of the people I spoke to didn't even was aware of the survey. So I'm trying to think of another way to get people involved. Do you have any ideas on that?
Are you asking me, or are you asking the committee? Sorry, it's hard when I'm not in the room.
Yeah, I'm asking you. Again, 58 people, and most of them did not even know that we had a survey. I know there's information out there, but somehow it's not getting filtered to them in some way. So do you have any other ideas that we can maybe come up with to get the information out there? Questions
It's a good question. Yeah, so I think with the Inside Santa Clara and the Mission City Scenes, the bill insert, I think that's going to reach a very large portion of the city residents. Because everybody gets that in their mail for the Inside Santa Clara fall edition of the city newspaper. And then also, as far as the utility bill inserts, that's going to reach everybody who receives their utility bills by mail. So I think those two are going to be a very big outreach opportunity to reach folks who are not necessarily, getting the e-notify emails or following the city's Facebook next door or Twitter accounts, but that should reach a large portion of the community. Certainly, we're also open to ideas in terms of how to reach folks. The committee can obviously suggest ideas as well. Those 58 people that you reached out, maybe there's a way that the city can reach out to them as well. But putting it out in the Inside Santa Clara newspaper and the Mission City Scenes utility bill insert is a way for us to, basically hit all of the registered mailing addresses in Santa Clara that receive utility bills by mail.
I had a question. You said that the Inside Santa Clara is the fall edition and the utility bill is September. Our last meeting is October 17th. So if they go out at the end of September, I don't know when Inside Santa Clara will get to people's doorsteps, but it could be we'll have missed a few meetings by then. So do you know, is it going to be at the beginning of September or at the end of September, or when these two things are going to go out?
Robin, do you have specific dates for when the Inside Santa Clara and when the utility bill inserts go out for September?
I don't have an exact date, so it's just right. It's fall edition. We can get that to you and follow up with an email. So it's the Inside Santa Clara is fall, and Mission City Scenes is scheduled for September. I'll try to find it during this meeting, but if not, we'll report back.
Okay, and I had a couple of more questions. First is, I received a list of community organizations to try to do some outreach, and these are community volunteer opportunities. They weren't actually, a lot of these organizations aren't even in Santa Clara, and it was notably missing some key organizations like Old Quad Residents Association, South of Forest Neighborhood Association, and the Pepper Tree Association. So I believe that this is sort of a hole in the city's outreach mechanism or policy that we don't have lists of community groups in the city, because this is the only thing I was able to get. And then if I look at this list, it's just a list of organizations with their addresses, and it doesn't tell me at all, like, I can click on it, but I'd have to click on every one to figure out if it's sort of a social organization or if it's an advocacy organization. I mean, it includes the Ballet Association. I'm not sure if I would want to reach out to them. So then the other question that I had was that I went to the City of Menlo Park's website. They have a really good FAQ on all of this, and I would like for the city to generate an FAQ so that we can educate the public on a lot of these issues. And you can perhaps look at what Menlo Park has done, because I
Okay,
really like theirs.
May I ask a question? Do you mean that you would like a FAQ on this work, the charter review?
Yes, you can look at the one that the Menlo Park has. It's
Right,
pretty good,
right,
yeah.
right. But that you would limit the FAQ to what we are doing with the survey to collect information. I'm just trying to figure out.
No, this is an update on the communication and outreach strategy. So to me, communication is to some extent educating the public on like, what is the CVRA? And I know some of that is on our website, but there's a lot of stuff that was in, for example, Menlo Park has a really good discussion about pros and cons of district elections. So there's a,
Okay, so I need clarification on the scope of our work. So is the scope of our work to collect public input on these questions that we are being asked? And that's the reason that it's such a shortened time zone? I understand what you're saying about the fall and the election and trying to get this ready. But if we extend our scope from charter review to other areas of the city that need attention, I'm afraid that we will not be able to gather the information that we need in order to make a recommendation to the city council in October.
yeah, I was just saying that as an aside, because I'm trying to do outreach and I don't know of these groups. I don't know how to contact some of these groups. So that's all I was saying.
Okay, all right, that's fair. I have an idea, but I don't think it's worthy here.
Okay. Anyone else? Yeah.
I think that's an excellent idea, and it also suggests that the pointer to a link to the FAQ be put into the survey, so before they take the survey. It won't be there, of course, to bottle up. If they want to look at it, they can.
To get educated on what they're voting on. Okay, are there any other questions?
So it's on your question of the survey, because I want to make sure that we have some action to take away from this. Can I suggest that as committee members who are going out and doing outreach, you all are hearing questions directly from these folks as you are meeting with them, and so you may have a better pulse on what are the more frequent questions that people are asking you that need clarification. So can I suggest that maybe the committee members can email me and staff with maybe the top questions that you're getting, maybe top 2 questions from each of you. That would make 14 questions. That would be a pretty healthy FAQ. And then city staff can, provide responses to those and then upload it to the website.
Okay. So would Member Ricosa, did you have, would any member of the public like to comment on this item?
Actually, I appreciate Vice Chair Silva's comments about not everybody is online, not everybody's looking on email, not everybody's looking at Facebook, and impressions don't actually mean anything to people who are looking at newspapers and neighborhood gossip to get their information. One big thing that I did notice is there was an informational workshop presented about 2 weeks ago, and I feel like these adjunct meetings are not noticed at all. Nobody I talked to knew about this. And I first thought maybe they're not interested. And it turns out after I told them that there was a meeting, a lot of people told me, I wish I had known about that. How do I find out about these things? The bigger tragedy is it happened at a public library. And when I went to the wrong library to find this, it turns out none of the libraries knew what the event was and where to go. And it'd be really nice, especially for library events, and especially for library events for things as important as a charter review process, if they were noticed at the library. Also, we could have this thing, I mean, it's a general thing, and I understand person at the end, your concern about making the scope larger and larger and larger, but at the same time, I think that this committee and this process is running into problems that have existed before time that affect this process, and that's the reason that these other issues are coming up. But if library events could be noticed even at the library, because they're not, you have to go online or you have to talk to people to find out what the events are, and they don't always know. Better yet, if all the library events at every library were noticed at each library so that people that go to the North Side Library can say, oh, next week there is something at the South Side, at the Central Library or another library, those would be very helpful as well. Again, I understand the committee meetings may be noticed very well, but there are adjunct meetings which people don't know about at all. And it's a real shame because I think people are going out of their way. This is additional time and additional effort, additional work that people have to do, and nobody knows about it.
2 minutes.
Thank you.
Any other member of the public? Okay, we will move on to item number 6.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I'm very concerned about items 6A and 6B in terms of discussing actual input. I know it's public or feedback. I know it's public and everything. Maybe we should concentrate more on discussing the difficulties because we don't want to affect any future input. Just like in an election, we never release any results until the polls are closed. And in this case, the polls are still open.
Are there any other comments?
Is there any criteria for the survey? So I've seen people, they said they voted twice, and then there's people that aren't residents. Is there any kind of qualification for the survey?
So I'll take a stab at this question. I don't know if it's directed at me, but clearly you can see the responses from people who are not residents of Santa Clara in the latest survey results that were shared. You have 5 respondents who are not residents of Santa Clara out of the 199. So it's a quite small percentage, and because the individual responses are provided as well, you can exclude those responses from the tally. So that is, as far as voting twice, I'm not sure that the survey allows that, but I don't know if there are very explicit mechanisms within the survey that disallow it either. So that would be a question, I think, Robin, if on how the Boca City Hall website manages to reject second responses.
Any other questions? So I guess, do we want to have staff show some of the results? I mean, certainly I'd like to know how many people responded to the survey, but I don't really see, in fact. Okay. Okay. I mean, there may be more. Okay. So I had asked this question of the city clerk, and I basically said, when we get the results of the survey, will this represent a mandate? And so I got a response from Dr. Gobele, and it said, this type of survey is not likely to yield data that could be used to assume that there is a mandate. At the July 18th CRC meeting, it was stated that the survey is not intended to be scientific. Instead, it is intended to elicit views from interested members of the community. The reasons that this is not a scientific survey include only a very small share of the city's population is likely to respond. It is not likely that a representative sample of the population will respond. It is not possible to determine whether responses reflect demographic makeup of the city and the geographical distribution of the population. So I guess I'm really questioning the point of having this survey since it doesn't really inform us of anything. And perhaps if there are these questions in here, can we amend the survey to ask people of their zip code or of their ethnicity so that we can maybe be able to determine from the survey more substantially what the intent of the public is. That would be more scientific. Because if it's not scientific, then it's not data, it's not significant, statistically significant, and so it doesn't tell me anything.
May I comment on that, Chair?
Yes, of course, yes.
Okay. Yeah, so I don't think we're going to get a statistically significant or a mandate with the online survey. I don't think anybody had the impression or the illusion, and if we did, then probably we should do some better communication about the intent of the survey. Just to recap, the point of the committee is to solicit the input and engage the residents to hear from them how they would like to change the order to make it by district, to make our voting by district. That is what Measure N did. Measure N is as statistically significant as you can get because it is on the ballot and people voted for it. So with over 70% of people voting to want to engage on figuring out how to do districts, that is as good as you'll get. And until an item is placed on the March ballot, we will not know unless the city is willing to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on a extremely robust, survey process or polling process. And until then, you still won't know until the issue comes on the ballot in March. So the idea of the committee is to use as many tools at their disposal to get a pulse, to figure out what they can put on the ballot that will improve the chances of the ballot measure passing, not necessarily to determine what people are going to vote or how people are going to vote. So the survey, the online survey, is yet another tool at your disposal to solicit and garner that input. It is by no means a scientifically, statistically representative sample of how people in Santa Clara would vote in March, but it is yet another tool at your disposal, as are the listening sessions, as are the bill inserts and the outreach that we're doing. So use it as a tool, not necessarily as a prediction of how people will vote in March.
Okay. Are there any other comments from members of the committee?
What are we doing, 6 or 6A?
Well, I guess we just had the verbal report, and you have the survey results in front of you. So, so right now we're doing 6A. So
yeah. So as far as the verbal report, just real quick, I heard from committee member Ricosa that he doesn't want to bias folks, so maybe we won't go into the actual detailed results. But just the pre-report that was sent to you last week had, let me pull that up real quick. It had 50 some odd responses, and the report that was pulled as of today has just under 200, 199 responses. So it is up to the committee. I mean, if you guys want to keep the survey up as is, if you want to modify it, as Chair Jane had mentioned, we can do that. But clearly, more people are heading over to the survey and filling it out as they hear about it. So, just between last week and this week, we've seen quite a significant increase in the responses.
I would like to,
Excuse me. It really got my ears to pop when you said the word, we should ask people their ethnic. I really think that that's not a wise idea to do on a survey. It could really skew their survey results in terms of people wanting to respond or how they would respond. And I don't think you'd get anything really good out of that. And I'm also concerned legally about what kind of impression that might make. So I would recommend to the committee to not put any questions about the person who's answering about their ethnic or those types of questions on a survey like this.
okay, it just seems like every time I take a survey online, they always ask my ethnicity and my age and my salary. So just every one of them asks all of
I understand that, but
you cannot answer it if you don't want.
Those are conducted in a very scientific way, and this is a very ad hoc process, and I really would suggest to you not to do that. But if you want to do it, I can't stop you. I'm just giving you my advice.
Okay, I would like to hear from Dr. Gobelet for how we can make this more statistically significant.
As I said in my email, I think that the whole intent of the survey process is to give people a chance to voice opinions, but it's not intended or not possible to give you any sense of what the community as a whole thinks, just what people who choose to respond to the survey think. So it's highly subjective. I don't think it's intended to be an objective scientific survey. I think it's intended to help people feel like their opinion matters and that they can give input into public processes. I think, as Brian said, that it might, or Hassam said, it might cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to do a scientific survey, and I don't think you have time for that. I think that the ballot in March will give you the results, the only results that are reasonable to expect. So I don't think you can change your survey into something that would tell you whether you have a mandate or what % of the people think this or that.
So right now we have 200 respondents. If we had 5,000 respondents, is that then statistically significant?
I would say not, for a variety of reasons, including the fact that people can respond more than once, and you can't judge how many people respond multiple times. And I don't think it's possible to, no matter how many responses you get, to say that this is statistically significant unless you know more about the kinds of people who are responding. And again, that gets us back to the point that this open City Hall process is not really intended to yield scientific results.
Dr. Goble, I'd just like to ask you a question. Isn't really the most reliable information that we have the ballot question and the voter results of Measure N?
Probably, but again, what share of the city's electorate or the voting population, the eligible voters, voted on that particular ballot item? I don't know. I haven't looked at the data. So again, you can't, it's not a perfect measure, but it may be the best that you could count.
I mean, I'm just saying of all the data that we have, it's that percentage of voters' approval of that question, which appears to be that the populace of Santa Clara wants to go to some type of districts. Is that?
You can look at the results of Measure N and the results of this ad hoc survey or this very informal survey that's underway and see if you see any contradictions. And so far, I think probably they aren't contradictory results.
For my impression, Measure N just said districts. The survey asks people how many districts. So I'm trying to figure out, can I use the survey to determine how many districts the people want? That's what I'm trying to get to. And apparently I can't.
You may be able to use it as suggestive of what they want. I wouldn't say
I just like to make
any way of statistically significant judgments on the matter.
I'd just like to make a suggestion that, and this comes from just my having grown up in a family of 7 children, that sometimes the best way to see if people agree or disagree with a certain proposition is to just start making that proposition and see how many people go with you or oppose you. So if you took these survey results, you could easily say, well, a majority of people seem to want 6 districts. So you could simply declare that that's the survey so far and say, is that what you really want to do? It looks like your neighbors want to go to 6 districts. Do you agree or disagree?
But it's not statistically significant.
That the purpose of what you're doing is not to conduct a survey. The purpose of what you're doing is to hear as much as you can from the public given the time and the circumstances. And you're bogging yourselves down in the process of getting ready to convince, to figure out, to how are we going to get information, as opposed to just simply starting to come to a consensus. It's up to you. I mean, we have very little time left to actually get it somewhere in terms of forming a recommendation. I'm just, based upon my years of experience on the face of this earth, it just seems to me like you just have to start moving in one direction and seeing how many people agree with you or disagree with you.
Member Almazal.
I read over all the surveys that have been available to us and all of the comments, and I was really pleased that people were commenting on 3 districts with 2 members each, or 2 districts. But by and large, what struck me this afternoon as I was reviewing it is people thought we should not be spending money, wasting money on this process, because we already knew what we were supposed to be doing. So I understand about the confliction of not being able to have, all the data to be sorted and analyzed. But I think that this is working because more people are looking at the survey. There was a neighborhood event in my neighborhood, National Night Out. We've never participated in it, but these 2 very nice families got together and they were enthusiastic, and people came out. And I brought up this topic and said, this is interesting. What do you think? They hadn't heard of it, but they all went back and said that they would look at the survey and see. And I think that is how we're going to be able to get people involved, because we are part of the community and we're inviting them to participate in the community. That's the first step in community development, right? And the second, third, fourth, and nth step is doing statistical analysis of how you crowdsource and what you get. But we don't have enough time for that. So I really want to get onto what are the people saying to us, and then how, when we look at that information, when we get it back each time, what can we do? Because we're not going to get an additional month and a half or 2 months to do this, I don't think. Correct, Mr. City Clerk? Yeah, we have it. So that's just
correct.
I think that people are asking more questions about it, and I like the idea of a FAQ, because many people have asked, how did we get here? How did we happen? I don't remember anything about this. Well, of course not, because if you don't read the inserts and you don't read stuff and you just wait until the election time, and then a lot of people want to know, what is ranked choice voting? So that would be a great thing to put on the FAQs. And then, why are we in such a rush to get it done? Well, we need to tell them why we're in such a rush. We need to tell them why we're doing it right now. That would all be very transparent, and that's only 4, but I'm sure we could come up with, 8 FAQs for this particular process that would be really helpful. But I don't think we are going to get the statistical analysis that you might want. I personally, that's somebody else's job. Thank you.
Any other, okay, Member Cooley.
Okay, so I wanted to comment on a few things. First, I think framing the survey in terms of statistical analysis and that kind of importance is dangerous. This is just like someone coming to our meeting and inputting to us. It's a lower, you're putting out a way for a lower bar for someone to be able to get to us. The survey, the difference between the survey and an email to the city council is that to email, not city council, to email the city clerk about districts, they have to go find the email and email. The survey gets sent to them saying, please respond. That's really all it is. And I actually found this survey really a lot of interesting stuff in here. I do think we should discuss it just because, just like when people are coming here, as much as we want to wait and get as much input as we can over the next 2 months, we're going to have to move forward. We can't just wait and in the last meeting make all the decisions. We're not going to be able to do that. And so with some of the things I actually took from this, I took some really interesting segues from this. The residency question I thought was fascinating. It was like 95%, which was really interesting because as I understand it, if we don't have anything about residency in our ballot measure, it's going to go back to what's in the charter, which is citywide. But also really fascinating in here was pretty much, it was not a lot. It was not many people said no, but the 11 who did all had, their responses were all like, we probably shouldn't have a residency requirement with long reasons. So the people who said no are really passionate about that. In terms of, there was a lot of ideas in here, some of them more far-fetched than others. The one that caught my eye, someone was talking about possibly doing overlapping districts in order to, you would still have, people could have multiple council members, but the group that elects them is different. I thought that was a fascinating notion that I had not heard of before. I don't know if anyone else does that anywhere. And the final note I really took from this is that there were a lot of people commenting on how either they didn't like the lines that were drawn last time, which of course we can't do much about, but there was a couple who talked about what Steve brought up, which is we should probably think about our process for districting going forward and have that in the charter. And so I certainly, I mean, I brought this up, I think, last meeting, and I was kind of like, I don't know if I'm the only one who cares about this kind of minutia, but from the survey, I'm getting there's quite a few people out there who think the process of districting is somewhat important and they should be resolved. I don't get the impression people really care strongly one way or the other, but it's definitely, I think this is probably coming from the historical of lots of places are gerrymandered. People do feel like it's an important issue to be written down and should not just be ad hoc. And those are what I got out just of reading this yesterday, and I just read through the most recent ones here for the last 11 that were added in. And I do think that we should take these, I mean, it is a lower bar to answer the survey, so maybe it's not as, people don't feel as passionate about the great people who come here and give us great comments, but we should take it as public input, just like if someone had come here and, you know, they took the 10 minutes to fill out the survey, and we should respect that and use it. As much as I would like to be able to say we could have, you know, a phone survey that does a statistically advanced thing, we're not getting that. We have to use the measure A and measure N results, and we have to put something out. And I mean, I know if the ballot measure fails, that'll be really a problem. But it's kind of, that's the feedback the city gets, is the ballot measures. So we're gonna have to put something up, and we're gonna get yes or no from the city or from the city-wide population that way.
Member Benito.
Yeah, I found it interesting talking to people, and I did it. I did a thing with our neighborhood group, but then individually talking to people and just getting the conversation going at the night out, and then at some of the I went to a couple of the concerts in the park and the street dance. And it's really interesting to hear. A lot of people want to do a lot of different things with this, and really it's just districting, but it's either a really heavy ethnic issue or it's a financial issue. I don't want to be in the bedroom community while there's billion-dollar operations up north, you know, and I mean, and so I got a lot of information that way, and I think this is good. And, you know, the survey is just one little point, you know, and it just, of many, hopefully we're gathering, but I think it's good just to keep it going. And the more events we have, and the more actually city events that I can get to and talk to people as well as on my own, I think it works out really well, because you get people thinking about it and talking about it, and then maybe everybody will be much more informed during election time.
Member Silva.
Yeah, I believe that once we do the Art and Wine Festival, we have a captive audience, we're going to get a larger pool of people, and a lot of them are going to be from Santa Clara. And I have a question to our city clerk. On Measure N, how many people voted on Measure N in the last election? Do you know that answer?
I don't know off the top of my head. I can pull up the exact results, but I do recall it being roughly around 30,000 voters voted on Measure N, and it passed with slightly over 70%.
That's a strong amount of data we can get there for 30,000 people is a good use for data, and we should be guiding off those.
I have those numbers if you want them. It's 21,902 voted yes, which was 70.4%, and 9,208 voted no, which was 29.6%.
Thank you.
My understanding is that the Art and Wine Festival booth will not happen because we didn't get enough members to sign up for times, and it was too late to register. Is that correct?
It is correct that we did not get enough members to sign up. As to whether it is too late, it is certainly more difficult now, and I would defer to Robin if it's not possible at this point to get a booth, but it is certainly more difficult than since last month when we met and asked the committee.
That is correct. I can look into possibly if a couple of you wanted to stand at another table and use some of their space. I can look into that, but to get your own table or spot at Art and Wine, you have to staff it both days for the entire event. And we had one committee member send in times, so that wasn't enough to cover the full event. So I can look into a place where you can maybe stand if you're there.
I was kind of waiting for this meeting to kind of get information on that, as far as who wants to do that. I'm committed to do Saturday if somebody wants to do Sunday and help out.
I will be there the whole time, and nothing prevents us, as in pairs or whatever, just to walk around. There's nothing. We should be able to do this without a physical booth.
We kind of moved on to C. Should we
I
do
know,
B?
unfortunately.
Just as a.
I was just responding to his comment about.
But yes, again, I don't think we should discuss actual results. At this, and if I make a motion that we don't discuss any results, at least in this meeting.
I'll second. Yeah, I'll second.
Okay. All right, we'll take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
You have to raise your hands because I think we're split on this. We only have 2, 3. All opposed? All right, motion fails. So I guess we can discuss the results. City Clerk, would you announce your summary of the results?
Sure. It's on the first page. Out of the 199 respondents, 194 were residents, so it is up to the committee to, read and either weigh in or exclude the 5 who are non-residents. And as far as all of the 199, or the folks who did respond to the survey, about 2/3 of them had opted or had elected on the survey in favor of the 6-district plan that is currently in place. And of the remaining 2/3, half of them preferred to have 3 districts. A little over half of them preferred to have 3 districts with 2 council members each. Roughly a quarter suggested for 2 districts with 3 council members each. And then the remainder had some other idea or plan in mind, which, as several committee members have already noted, these respondents on the surveys, you can treat them as people who are coming to your meeting and providing public input during a 2-minute mic session. And as you go through the survey responses, the majority of them have written some commentary as part of the question number 5, which is kind of a free form section for them to write whatever they want to write, and they've actually taken the time to write some very thoughtful responses. So I would very much urge the committee members, if they have not yet done so, to go through and read the responses. I think it gives you a little more insight rather than just the yes/no questions or responses to the prior questions. It gives you some insight into their thought process behind why they selected certain preferences over others. So obviously I'm not going to go through and read them for you. That's, I think, pretty much the summary of the survey as of today.
Member Silva.
Yeah, when I started to look at the survey, it kind of already sets the tone by asking, do you want to go 6 districts? And to me, the question should have been, do you want to go to districts? The second question should have been, how many districts would you prefer? Once they went to question 1, they already made the option of already 6 districts. And if they said no, then they would choose. So I think it kind of obscures the data on that, the way it's stated, in my opinion.
Well, every questionnaire is always skewed in some sense, but we had a subcommittee of 3 members of this committee that formulated the questions to that survey. Okay, I mean, I'm just saying that 3 members of this committee crafted those questions.
I understand that, but that doesn't mean it's correct, right?
Yes, it does. Technical question?
Yes, member.
It lists number of attendees. What's an attendee?
Sorry, I was unmuting. I think the attendees is just the number of people that opened up the survey, and then the actual people who ended up responding to it were a smaller number.
Okay.
So if you opened up the survey and just didn't, you read it and you're like, maybe I'm not interested in responding, you were probably registered as an attendee. Maybe you're like, I'm not interested in responding now, but then you opened it later and then you filled it out. So, that's why you see roughly 74 people who opened up the survey who didn't respond at the time of them opening up the survey.
Thank you.
And it saved you about 10 hours of public comment because you can see that at the top of the summary. That's about how much time it took people collectively to fill out the survey. So it did save you about 10 hours of public comment.
Okay, very good. So now we move on to, yes.
Just a clarification.
Yeah, Member Cooley.
If we to leave the survey up, do you guys need us to decide that, or is it something that unless we decide otherwise, it'll just stay up in terms of?
We'll leave it up. So, there's no cost to leaving it up at this point. So we have the survey questions up. Obviously, if the committee wants to change some of the questions on there, they can do that. But keep in mind that it would be difficult to correlate the early responses with the future responses. You won't know if somebody who filled out the first set of responses went and filled out the new questions that were asked. So it's up to the committee, but again, treat this as another form of public input, like somebody coming to the meeting and giving you their 2 cents. So that's kind of how we view the survey results. So if you decide not to change it, it's just going to stay up, and we can continue to give you the responses at the next meeting as well.
I would like to add a question for their people to add their zip code to the survey. Their zip code is probably the best thing. Because Dr. Gobele said that, quote, it is not possible to determine responses reflect the demographic makeup of the city and the geographical distribution of the population, and that's why it's not a scientific survey. So the thing is that if we got people on the north side that all wanted 2 districts and people on the south side that all wanted 6, that might say something.
We can certainly add that question, Chair. I do want to point out that the zip codes don't necessarily map to where the current district lines are drawn. So that might be something that you might want to consider as well. But the zip code may be not as granular as what you may be looking for, but we can certainly add any question that you would like.
Yeah, we could add what current voting district you live in. We could add that maybe. It's possible that a lot of people don't know that, but they do know their zip code. Anyway, that's a question. I don't know. I guess I'm gonna leave that up to the committee to decide. I don't want us to have to decide that. We have a committee for that. Okay, so now we move on to item B. So would members of the committee like to report on their outreach meetings and outreach efforts? So raise your hand if you'd like to report. Yes,
So I did put this up on Nextdoor. I did not get a lot of responses up from Northside. I think I got 3, and they were mostly clarifying. So there was not a huge outcry on Nextdoor for that. And then most of the other meetings I had were in person, and the general, the people who outreached to me, the general attitude seemed to be not wanting to end up with the mini mayor systems. There was a lot of concern about being able to have council members of some way, shape, or form who represent the whole city. And that was all I have.
Anyone else like to report? Member Silva.
Yeah, I did contact with the neighbors. I belong to a few Santa Clara social clubs or nonprofit clubs and some friends. And again, as I said earlier, that a lot of them didn't know the survey was there. A lot of them don't remember what they voted on in the election for Measure N. Of course, that was a while. And I had a good response for 3 3 districts over the 2 and the 6. The majority would rather had the 3 districts. So that's about it right now. I have it down, and I don't have names, but I do have the data at home, and there was people on tallying it up on a spreadsheet. So I don't know how useful that is at the end.
Anyone else? Yes, Member Colterman.
I had a letter to the Santa Clara Weekly published, I think today, because I know it was on the Silicon Valley Voice, which is their online system. It appeared today, and it was directing people to the city's website and giving them the options for providing input and what the purpose of the Charter Review Committee is, and that it's necessary because we have a mismatch between district voting and our city charter. So I tried to, in minimal words, meet the word limit, but express what the purpose of the committee is and asking people for input. And then I did post on Nextdoor, and I noticed the city also had posted the very similar information. Facebook, both public and my private page. The only comment I got was, why is the city still spending money on this? We thought this was a done deal. You know, the judges said we have to go to districts. Why are we still engaging in this process? And I was able to answer that, mostly just thumbs up from the post. Also asking other people and organizations that I have either currently belonged to or belonged to when my children were younger, to post that same information, emailing people who I know that live in the city of Santa Clara. My husband and I walk every day, so talking to neighbors and talking to people. I have not heard anyone say they want some form of districts other than 6 or single-member districts, 6 districts, but I have heard concerns about the city spending money on the appeal, on the lawsuit, and how much this is costing taxpayers, and liking or wanting to have this be done, and so that we can move forward and aren't spending taxpayer dollars anymore on the issue.
Any Member Almazal?
I also posted it on Nextdoor, and I got a lot of people saying, thank you very much. I didn't know this was happening. And I got a few people who were irritated. It seemed like they were irritated in the email. I read it as irritated. Maybe I was wrong, but they seemed irritated because they didn't know anything about it. And so I tried to reassure them, and then they also, I directed them to the city to look at the website, and then they were engaged in some conversation with the website. So with people here at the city. So I think that the more you can redirect people, if, like you're saying, if they're not getting the information correct, there are lots of resources for us to go to. And I'm having a Saturday, I'm at the Mission Branch Library from 11 to 1 o'clock, and that's been noticed everywhere. I don't know if anyone's going to come, but it's been there, so I'm looking forward to that.
Mr. Chair, you'll talk about the August 3rd session?
I'd be happy to. So Member Ricosa and I, we held a meeting at the Mission Library on August 3rd. When I arrived there, the librarians didn't know anything about my meeting, and I had told them that I wanted a PowerPoint presentation, and they put me in a room that didn't have a projector. Then when the main librarian came, she sorted everything out and put us in the big room, but it wasn't really planned, even though they knew I was going to do a presentation. So there were only 2 attendees for our event, and these are comments from the attendees. One person said, we drew districts based on current council member residence locations. Going forward, districts should be decided with a blank slate, ignoring where current council members live. Another comment was, the city should do more to educate the public. We need a more informed public. Another comment was, we should be looking at voting systems as well as ask how districts are drawn. The voting system should also include the voting system should be a separate ballot measure. That would be ranked choice voting or something else. Another person said, if we allow a candidate to live outside of the district they are running for, then that is not within the safe harbor provision of the CVRA. So I think this person was saying that the person has to live in the district. And then another person said that if we think the districts would be too small, then how about just moving to 4 council members plus a mayor? One comment was this person does not like the at-large mayor system and prefers to have a rotating mayor like some of the cities around us. And the other person said that they believe the scope of the Charter Review Committee should include how voters elect council members. And there was another comment saying the time that we have is too short. We should have started last November. And then I asked these 2 people what their preferences were. The first person said 5 districts with 5 council members with a rotating mayor. Otherwise, they would like to see 7 districts with 7 council members with a rotating mayor. Otherwise, they would like to see 3 districts, since only 2 districts would polarize north versus south. The other person attending said they prefer 3 districts with council members elected every 2 years, and they actually wanted the mayor to have just a 2-year term, so be elected every 2 years. That's the feedback I got. It was only 2 people, so again, it's not statistically significant. That's all I had. Okay, so now we are on item, sorry, I lost my notes here. So we can discuss additional outreach opportunities. Does anyone have any suggestions for how the city could do a better job informing the public or getting more people to answer the surveys? Yes.
I've been working with Robin on getting a date for Machado Park to have a listening session. And then John Sontag, who was here, he's from District 3 also. He and his wife want to host a listening session at their house. So I will be getting that information to Robin so that we can post it on the city's website.
Very good. Any other member have suggestions? Yes, Member Cooley.
So this doesn't really fit here, but it's a concern I have about this in that we don't really have it on here. I think we need to have some of the stuff on the next agenda item to start whittling some of this stuff down, because in particular, if we choose, let's say, to start talking seriously about having 3 districts, we're going to have a public outreach for how do you handle multi-member districts, yada, yada. And we can't have those discussions right now because we haven't resolved some of these issues. So just in terms of our time frame, since we have, I think, 3 meetings left, I think at the next meeting, we're going to have to move past some of the plenaries if we want to have public input on the second. I mean, even now, there's some stuff I'm like, well, we should get public input on some of these things, but until we start having those, like actually start moving this committee in a direction, we can't get follow-up input on some of the more details. Again, I'm thinking primarily on if we decide to look at anything besides 6 kind of multi-member districts, we're going to have to do outreach on that. And we need to, I guess I'm saying that we need to decide that soon. And I'm kind of, honestly, in terms of, I think we should do more outreach till the next meeting of the same type we have. I think we should leave the survey open, but I think at the next meeting, we need to somehow get to the point where we can start asking the follow-on questions. Because I don't think right now we could actually start asking on follow-on questions that we're going to have. And I know we're going to have once we start working through the details. So that's my concern about, like, all we have on here is more outreach. And I'm like, well, if we don't progress, we're not going to get to the new outreach that we're going to need to do. So that's just kind of a general.
So are you saying that we would then maybe do a second survey?
Yes. So what I would think on outreach, I think we should leave the current survey open for talking about number of districts. I think we might want to start on at least working through what we would talk about if we want to talk about, how we district. Like, that's going to be a conversation. And I think we can say we want to start that now. So I think we should, with the feedback. So I think that process should get started. And I think at the next meeting, we should probably have on the agenda a discussion about 6 versus 3 and actually trying to move forward on that. Just from the feedback, it seems like that's over 2. No one's really talking about 2. I think we should have a discussion on the residency that was up, and just, I think we probably can resolve that if we have it on the agenda. And then I think there should be a discussion on the next agenda on what kind of items which are not being, we're not getting feedback on now that we need feedback on. Because that's what I don't think we can do now, because we haven't really had anything following up. Does that make sense? Okay. It was kind of a weird one to fit there, but it's in a spot for it.
Member Ricosa?
Yeah, how can we have discussions on 3 versus 6 and yet still get unbiased input from the public, even on October 17th?
Well, if we have a deadline of, what is it, the final meeting?
October 17th.
It's October 17th. We're going to be getting feedback all the way till that last meeting. So at some point before that, we're going to have to start moving forward. If we wait till the last meeting, we're not going to get anything done.
So then anybody who comes to the last meeting's input won't be useful.
I mean, yeah, it's going to be less useful.
Well, presumably we'll be voting on something, and it's just like a hearing of the city council. The people that attend the city council maybe have some sway.
Right, but the city council does not vote on any issue until all input is completed.
Yeah, but if you come to the very last planning meeting of a building, the input you're getting is different from if you come to the first. The process does have to move forward.
I think we need to respect the public.
Okay, well, we have a difficult problem here. And it's not going to be easy for us to come to a resolution. But we have to do our best, and we have to, basically, we're trying to come up with a solution that has a high probability of passing a ballot measure. That's really our goal. So how we determine that is going to be an interesting process. Would anyone else like to talk about how we get more outreach? Any suggestions? Okay, so now we move to the public. Would any member of the public like to comment on item 6, which is the survey, responses from our outreach meetings, or opportunities for more outreach? Step forward, please. You have 2 minutes.
Yes, Steve Chesson, President of Californians for Electoral Reform. I wanted to respond or answer a question, actually, that was raised by Committee Member Cooley. He was asking about other kinds of districting configurations. Do people use overlapping districts? And to my knowledge, no city in California uses overlapping districts. However, there are some citizens in Sunnyvale, which is currently going through a districting process, who are interested in proposing an overlapping districting plan. And if you'd like, I could connect you with those people offline. The other thing I wanted to mention is the city of Kansas City, Missouri, uses a very novel system to elect their city council. It wouldn't survive scrutiny under the CVRA, but I thought I would just let you know about it anyway. They have a 12-member council plus a separately elected mayor. The city is divided into 6 districts, and 2 people are elected from each of those districts. One person is elected by the district itself, and the other person is elected by the entire city to represent that district. It's an interesting hybrid solution. Like I said, it wouldn't fall into the safe harbor of the CVRA, but it does give you an idea that you really could be thinking out of the box for solutions for Santa Clara.
Any other member of the public? Yes, please step forward.
Hello, my name is Mishra. I'll make it very quick. Number one, on the survey, for some reason, I never even received the survey. And I tried to follow the city's thing very closely, but somehow I'm not participating in that one. And looking at the survey today, 194 people from city responded, compared to about 30,000 people who voted on Measure N. So survey as such as it stands, I think doesn't reflect any way the wishes of the people, how they want to do it. So the other thing I want to suggest is, when you're asking about additional outreach opportunities, My suggestion is in all the libraries, if you have big poster announcing the event, probably you'll get more input, people to come in. I didn't see anywhere anything. And then the listening thing, which is, I think, at North Mission Library, we should have something on this side too. It seems there are 2 sessions over there, nothing on this side. And the last thing I want to suggest is that I think we are getting into 6-3-2 and 2-3 and all this kind of thing. From charter's standpoint, maybe we should not box ourselves that we want 6 districts or want this or that. Maybe we should make it general, saying we want to go to districting. And let us see what happens in coming 2020. If the people don't like it, saying, well, okay, well, we don't like this thing, we can have other charter which can change that thing. But I think we should not box ourselves that we'll have this or that. Otherwise, the time which we have, I think you may not be able to complete the job which you have in the mind. But that's up to committee. Thank you.
Thank you. That's what Measure N was. Do we want districting? It was already resolved by Measure N. Okay. Any other member of the public? Oh, Mr. Silva.
Can I say one thing before you? I'm sorry. I'd like to hear from the member that we made sit down. He wasn't finished. If you'd like to come up after this gentleman to complete your yeah. Thank you. I'm sorry.
So I actually like that idea, which is we say that we are going to vote with districts, and then say how we're going to vote with districts, such as a proportional voting system, and that would address almost everything, regardless of how many districts we have or how many people that we have. My questions about the survey were, how are questions about topics, additional topics, addressed? For example, there were comments about, their opinions about how the mayor is voted for and things like that. Full disclosure, I did not fill out the survey. But at the same time, I would like to see these discussions summarized in the official survey report done by the city. At the same time, hearing these discussions, it's kind of amazing how we never have the time or money to do things the right way, but we have enough time and money to spend on lawsuits and audits and even a flawed process multiple times. I feel like this question has come up several times, and last year we didn't spend any time on it. In fact, we compressed a potential 75-day input period into fewer than 3 weeks, and I feel like we're doing the same thing here. Right? People have been able to give input. Member Coltman, Member Cooley have mentioned this, that people have been complaining about things like how much the audits cost, the committee costs and things like that. People have not been able to give input on the lawsuits or the appeals, just a comment, which cost even more. Where I come from, we don't have the phrase, everyone's entitled to their own opinion. We actually look at what entitled means, and we break it up into 2 different things. We say everyone is permitted to have their own opinion, but not everyone is qualified to have that opinion. And I think that's one of the problems that we have here in this city, which is a number of people have mentioned, we do not notice, we do not educate the public enough. And as Member Silva mentioned, by putting 6 districts, 2 districts, 3 districts onto the survey, we actually anchor a lot of people's thinking. But at the same time, there's no way to not anchor people's thinking without educating people on what that means. What would this entail? What kinds of things would happen? And I would like to see more of that, and it sounds like everybody else would as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member of the public?
Yeah, Rob Jordanek, Santa Clara resident. Several people, at least 2 people on this committee have said that Measure N somehow endorses districts, but I just wanted to read what Measure N said. Shall the city of Santa Clara engage the voters in a public process to draft a charter amendment to ballot measure to elect by district? And it was just asking, someone, I think Mr. Jane said it was, do you want to have districts? And it didn't say that. It said, do you want to engage the voters in a process? And people could be against that, having districts, but still be in favor of having a public process. So I don't think anyone should be, I actually am in favor of the district idea, but I don't think Measure N should be used as the statistically valid data that says people want districts. Because all it said was, do you want to have a public process? So And back to the main point that I wanted to talk about earlier is that I would like the committee to look at what's best for the city of Santa Clara and how our demographics, our geography, not just because it worked in Palmdale or some other city, doesn't mean it's ideal for Santa Clara. And the CVRA does not require single-member districts. It doesn't. I've actually read it. It just says that you should have, quote, appropriate remedies. That's all it says. So you can actually, there's many options to meet the CVRA requirements. And just back to my neighborhood, the north side, I think the north side is a community of interest. It should not be split. And just because of the geography and demographics of Santa Clara, that 6th district wouldn't work for us because it would split the north side, and we could have 3 districts, and that would allow all the north side to be in
2 minutes.
in one district. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Hi there. Anthony Becker, resident of Santa Clara. I've been talking about districts since 2008, before the letter even arrived here in Santa Clara to have us adapt in 2011 or 2010. Don't quote me on that. Yet here we are over a decade later, and we're still asking the same questions, especially with an election under our belt that asks the question, do you want districts? Yet continuing, we still spend more and more money. That's $200,000 we'll be spending if we go with another ballot measure. With Measure N, that's $200,000 on ballot measures. Once again, I will reiterate, the judge told us that 6 districts and elected mayor. So why do we keep fighting? Why do we keep wasting taxpayer dollars? If it wasn't taxpayers' dollars, money being spent, and it was the money being spent by those with an agenda, this would never happen. The CVR lawsuit was right, and we should adapt. This will work. These districts will work. North side, maybe 2 districts right now, but after the 2020 census, it will probably be 1. We will change after 2020 because our population has changed within the last 10 years. Because remember, this is going by 2010 data for these current 6 districts. I think districts are cheaper. They work for working class candidates and not those of special interests, and it allows a voter to connect closer with your candidates. 2018 was proof of that with the election of Councilmember Chahal and Councilmember Hardy. So therefore, I am tired of our city council being treated like a chessboard. I want independent and common sense thinkers on our council. Yet we are here, and this is all this is about power, and it's about losing majorities on the council and the pull on the council. Please, 6 districts is a solution. It gives legitimate democracy. Thank you.
Any other member of the public? Okay. Now you all get to come back up and talk about how many districts you want. This is where we take public input on how, if you would like to come back up, we're on item 7. Okay, okay.
Yeah, so one member of the committee talked about concept of mini mayors, and that's a phenomenon that happens when you do the single member districts. And you have to think about, do we want that in Santa Clara? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But in other cities, you could see, you get these mini mayors that they might look out only for their district and not for the city as a whole. And they could try to get cool stuff for their neighborhood, and maybe they would horse trade with other mini mayors. It happens in other cities, and it makes people think about their own neighborhood above what's best for the city as a whole. So I think that's something that should be considered when you decide how many districts there are. Thanks.
Okay, seeing, would you like to come forward? It's tough dealing with the public.
I know. Thank you very much. I am a little disappointed at the narrowness of the focus of this Charter Review Committee, which is when we look at what the problem is not districts, the problem is not voting method, it is how do we get fair representation in the city. And by addressing only one aspect of that, one dimension of fair voting, we have actually eliminated a lot of the possibilities available to us. And I think that's a really big problem. If we look at the problem has existed since we had a very bad beginning to the charter review committee, even for last year, and the districting committees, which is we were trying to address how without addressing the what. And when we tried to address the what, we addressed the wrong what. How do we, what are we trying to do? Avoid a lawsuit. And that's the wrong answer. The current process, we don't seem to be interested in fair elections, just following a process. And I think that's the big problem. CRC seems to be closed to changes and discussions needed to achieve fair elections, which include redistricting by neutral or cross-party agencies, transparency regulations, changing the voting system, changing the size of districts and elected body. But all of these topics seem to be off the table, and that's a problem. The fact that we're trying to rush everything and not put the appropriate time in to do the research. Other cities have spent a year or even longer on some of their lawsuit challenges or their remedy phases, and we seem to be putting in as little as possible, and that is something that we need to address. We don't seem to have very good input. Even in the trial, I feel that there were a lot of things that were misspoken, and it tells you the kind of background that the city is putting into a CVRA challenge, and I'm not comfortable with that, especially since it's our money. So I would like to see more open discussion on what the actual problem is, which is fair representation. I would like to see more education, not just input. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public? Okay. So this is not on the agenda, but we talked about this at the beginning. I would like to discuss items to be put on our future agenda. And Member Cooley had mentioned this as well. So this is where any member of this committee may want to talk about what they want to see on the next agenda.
Just a point. Our next meeting is the noon meeting?
Is the what?
The noon meeting, correct? 21st? Yes. And we have a hard exit at the end of that, correct? Someone had to leave. I just wanted to make sure I know what our... The next meeting was the 21st at noon, I believe. And then we have one the next, like 5 days later, the 26th. I want to make sure that's the correct on...
Correct.
The adjournment is to the next meeting on the 21st at noon, correct.
It's a Saturday meeting from 12 to 2, so 2 hours.
So, I mean, I think we should talk about what we should put on it. I just want to say that I do think that anything which, we do have to make sure we do public input first on the 21st, because we're on we have a stopping date, right?
Well, we had
5 days later.
we had plenty of opportunities for public input at this meeting. We had public presentations at the beginning, and then for every...
But the entire point of the noon meeting was to get a different time period. So it is important about that meeting.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I thought someone had to leave it too, I recall.
Okay. So,
Oh, that was the other room. Okay.
so would anyone like to put anything up as a topic for discussion at the next meeting?
Well, I wanted to further what Mr. Cooley said, that item 7, to receive public input on the actual Charter Review Committee business, be put up, like before item 6. Because I think this meeting got called at 6:30, and it took an hour and 40 minutes for us to get to the point where we took public input. And I think it's not fair to have the public wait that long.
I'm happy to make that change. Any other topics for discussion?
Yeah, I think we should put an item on to actually at least start the discussion on number, to get a feel of where the committee is going on number of districts, which was what the initial survey was on. I think that we probably should have a quick discussion about the residency requirement. And then, so I don't know if this one should be on it, but I think we should start the process to any discussion we want to have about any requirements on the districting process. We need to get that ball rolling, so I don't know if that would be, we should start, because if we don't, we can't pull that up in the last meeting, right? That's going to have to be something we start now.
Just so the committee knows, I will not be able to attend the 21st, the meeting on the 21st. So if you're going to have anything that involves a legal questions, please get them to me so I can have at least a written response available.
No one else from the attorney's office could be there?
We just had someone leave the attorney's office, and then an additional person is going to be out on paternity leave during that period of time. So we have like skeleton staff at the attorney's office at this point.
Okay.
So I will be around. I have to attend my nephew's wedding in New York, and I just was not able to change that. So I think that there oughtn't be too many legal questions about most of this. I can even give you a legal answer now. I mean, you just need to make some kind of recommendation. It's not really the districting process, it's the redistricting process. So it's really a question of, you can just make a general recommendation about whether there should be something in the charter about that, or whether the charter should simply say the city council shall adopt an ordinance about how redistricting shall occur, or whatever sentiment you have about how that should happen. And then we can come back with, a more refined concept in terms of actual charter language as to how that would work.
Given the time period, I would actually say we probably should, any of the stuff that sounds like it's going to be meaty, push it on the 26th, which is going to be our regular meeting, and try to, just because, like I said, I'm expecting the noon meeting to be, I mean, if we get to it, it's great, but we are have a time period. I mean, I think we should do public input first, and probably, like, if we're going to do a straw poll, we might do it at that meeting, but then, just in terms of, we have 2 meetings within 5 days, so.
I understand.
In terms of which one gets which questions, that was all.
Right. But the reason why we planned so many meetings is we're trying to squeeze them all into this short time frame because we have a lot of work to do. So, yeah. I would like to add a discussion of ranked choice voting or our voting method as a topic of discussion at our next meeting. So what I see here so far is, and we can continue some of these items to the following meeting, but I'd like to initiate the discussion of the number of districts, residency requirements, the redistricting process, and the method of voting. Yes.
What ranked choice voting, is that in our mission statement for this committee?
We don't have a mission statement. Our mission is to amend the charter to fix our elections and to make it consistent with what the CVRA wants.
Question, Mr. Doyle? From what your understanding of what the city council authorized us to do?
It did not in any way involve talking about ranked choice voting. I mean, I can't tell you what, you can decide as a committee what you want to talk about. I mean, if you don't want to have that on the agenda or don't want to talk about it, you can, as a committee, vote on whether you want to talk about that. It's up to you.
Member Silva.
Question to the city clerk, if he's still around. Didn't ranked choice voting come up in the ballot?
If you're referring to the Measure A, yes, ranked choice voting was a part of Measure A's ballot question, which did not pass. It was not part of the Measure N ballot question. So I'm not sure, Committee Member Silva, which ballot question you're referring to.
Yeah, that's what I was referring to. What was the count on vote on that failing? Do you know?
Not knowing the exact numbers, but I think it was around 56 to 44 was the final tally. 56 not in favor of Measure A, and about 44 that were in favor of Measure A. But keep in mind that Measure A also included a 2-district plan in conjunction with ranked choice voting. So,
being we have to put something out there the voter's going to approve, putting something out there that didn't approve is kind of a waste of time, and we don't have that much time. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Well, I was actually proposing 2 ballot measures. One would be on the number of districts, and then the other one would be on the method of voting. We could do 2 ballot measures, and they would be independent.
We really can't discuss this here. It's not on the agenda. It's not any.
No, we're just deciding We're not making a decision. We're just deciding what we're going to put on the agenda. We're not making any decisions.
We seem to be getting to the meat, that's all.
Okay. Yes, Member Bonito.
Can we review our charter in the next meeting? It seems like we're going in different directions. It seems like we're supposed to be doing community outreach, and I didn't know we were, are we going to this other thing where we're giving other selections like ranked choice voting, what have you? I don't see where that's in our charter.
Are you saying the mission of this committee
Yes.
as opposed to the charter of the city?
The mission of the committee, or the charter of the committee, yeah.
I think our attorney.
Brian just mentioned that. I mean, my point is, if we have a specific thing, I'd rather do that than the other things seem to be ancillary to what we're actually supposed to be doing. And so I think that, we need to make sure that we all understand what we're supposed to be doing and that we're doing that, rather than maybe just go on other things.
Maybe you can try this another way. You can just simply, you're allowed to, the Brown Act does not prohibit you from voting on what's going to be on the next agenda. So you can just take each of those items and vote whether you want to have it on the agenda or not. That's kind of the basic way you can handle this if you'd like.
Member Cooley.
So I just want to, for Member Ricosa, just a notion of a couple of the items that I don't think are on our charter, but we might put on our agenda with ranked choice voting, with the rotating mayor, could be done just on the basis of we got a lot of feedback relating to those items in our survey. So whether or not we take any action on them, in terms of what we put on the agenda, I think there's a reasonable thing saying you might want to have it on the agenda to discuss the amount of feedback we got, particularly related to ranked choice voting and whether or not our scope is too narrow. I think those were the two things that came across on a couple of people on the survey and a couple of people from the public. Just in terms of if we're talking about whether or not it should be on the agenda, there's that angle.
Okay. I think I will take the advice of the attorney, and we will vote independently on each of these to decide if we
Chair,
Yes.
may I offer just some thoughts of my own here? Is that okay?
What happened?
He wants to offer some thoughts of his own.
Yeah, but I didn't hear. Did he cut out? Oh.
No, I'm here. I'm asking
yeah,
if it's okay if I offer
yeah,
some
go ahead.
thoughts.
Yeah, you had the floor.
Okay. So this meeting on Saturday, which is I think what you're discussing about what to add on that agenda, just to recall, the committee decided to put this additional meeting on the calendar as a weekend meeting to give an opportunity for those members of the community who cannot make these evening meetings during the weekdays. So I would suggest, obviously it's up to the committee what they want on the agenda for the Saturday meeting. You may also just want to see how many people show up, but given it is a weekend meeting and this was the opportunity for those who can't make the evening meetings to show up, you may have a larger audience than usual. And so if you were to put on the agenda more items, my suggestion would just be to more heavily skew the agenda of the Saturday meeting in particular to public input. And then you have another meeting 5 days later. So I think maybe that's a regular evening meeting. So maybe some of the other items that you're wishing to discuss may be more appropriate when you don't have as big an audience there to provide their public input.
So my
That's
suggestion.
just my thoughts, but obviously it's up to you.
Yeah,
It's
my
up to you.
suggestion is like a council meeting. We can put all these on the agenda and we can continue the items based on the number of people that show up.
That's a good idea as well.
Okay. So we're not taking public comments at this point. I would like to vote on these independently. And
Public comment on what should be on the agenda should be, this is an issue we're voting on. They should be able to say on
Okay.
that particular thing.
all right,
If that's what this is about.
come forward, please.
So a couple of comments about the process. The first one is, I don't understand what the point of public input is if you do not take the public input as items that you can put on the agenda for the next meeting. I mean, if the point of public input is simply to talk and then get that information dropped, I understand that, but that's not what I understand public input to be. And I believe that if I have the opportunity, I would like to request that the items that were discussed do appear on the next agenda, because it does seem like the question of fair representative elections should be the charter of this charter review committee, not simply a number. That's the first thing. The second thing I would request is, there are only 5 people in the audience. At some point, for a public input session, limiting each person, for 5 people in the audience, to 2 minutes does not seem appropriate. Meaning, I would like to request that if there are, based on the number of people that are here, even the 3 minutes that used to be afforded to people at city council meetings. I understand that if there were 100 people here, or I would hope 10,000 people here, that would be a little different. But that's definitely not the case. And simply having a strict a 2-minute limit seems restrictive.
Thank you. It is the prerogative of the chair to set those time limits, so I could conceivably make them a different number at the next meeting.
Steve Chesson, President of Californians for Electoral Reform. If I recall correctly, and I don't have it in front of me, but I believe the staff report related to the establishment of this committee said it should consider how the city council is elected. And to me, that would also seem to include the method of election. Secondly, since you are limited at your Saturday meeting to a 2-hour limit, I strongly suggest that you put public input as the first item on the agenda, maybe even before you approve the minutes of this meeting. And then and let that take as much time as possible. And then if you don't get to the rest of the agenda, then you just carry that over to the next time. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we are going to vote independently on each of these. So the first is, do we want to put a discussion of the number of districts on the agenda for the next meeting? Is there a second for that?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Okay.
Excuse me, Chair Jane, who was the maker of that motion?
It was aye.
Okay, so you were the maker, second, okay.
Okay, and I move that we put on the agenda a discussion of the residency requirement for candidates in the district.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, 5-2, carries. And I move that we put on the agenda for the next meeting a discussion of how redistricting will, the process of redistricting, how to decide how to redistrict.
Second.
Okay, seconded by Coulterman. All in favor? Aye. Okay, opposed? Okay, that fails. So that will not be on the agenda. And then I move that we put on the agenda a discussion of ranked choice voting. Second?
Second.
Second. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, fails. All right, so on the next agenda, we will add the number of districts and the residency requirement. Okay, is there a motion to adjourn? Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, adjourn.
And then who seconded it?
Who seconded it? I think it was Coulterman. Yeah.
Couldn't make that weekend. You picked me like a day after I made plans on that day, and I'm like, great.
All right.
Parents were like, you can come visit us one day out of the next 3 weekends, and that was the one I picked.